Hello students, welcome to the teaching learning process. I am Waeza Afshan, Assistant Professor, Department of Education, Patna Women's College, Autonomous. Today's topic of discussion is skill of stimulus variation, which is one of the important skills in micro teaching. What is a stimulus? Any external force that disturbs the equilibrium is known as stimulus. Stimulus refers to an agent, action or condition that elicits, accelerates or rouses to physiological, psychological action, activity or responses. Variation means changing the stimuli to explain the content lively and remove boredom from classroom teaching. Stimulus variation is the change in the intensity of the external force by a teacher while teaching. It refers to the set of teacher behaviors that tend to secure and sustain pupils' attention. Now, let us see the definition of stimulus variation. It is defined as a set of behaviors for bringing the desired change of variation in the stimuli used to secure and sustain pupils' attention towards classroom activities. Stimulus variation is an important skill that helps to keep students attentive in the class and to sustain their motivation. This skill involves using various attention-producing behavior patterns from the part of the teacher in order to sustain the interest and attention of the students. The variation in stimuli generates interest among students in their learning and hence helps in their academic achievement. An efficient teacher efficiently switches between different stimuli during the class. Now, let us see the purpose of this skill. The significance of stimulus variation is directly proportional to the attention span of students. The change in the stimulus is necessary to keep away distractions while learning, or in other words, to keep the learners on track. Stimulus variation keeps students attentive in class and sustain their motivation. So, the purpose of this skill are to draw and maintain attention of pupils throughout the teaching process, to get rid of boredom, to emphasize and stress particular points. Now, let us see the components of this skill. These are movements, gestures, change in speech pattern. Now, the first one, movement. Objects in motion attract our attention. Movement in stimulus variation skill refers to the movement of a teacher from one point to another with a specific purpose. Thus, the movement carries wide significance in securing and sustaining their attention. For example, the teacher moves towards the blackboard to write certain important points on it to draw pupils' attention. She moves towards pupils to check their activities and to help them in solving certain problems. The teacher, while practicing the skill of stimulus variation, should learn to make well-planned, meaningful movements for securing and sustaining their attention. The teacher should avoid aimless wandering and pacing up and down the class. These movements can be monotonous and sometimes distracting. Next, gesture. Gestures are the movement of the parts of the body to direct attention, to express emotions, to emphasize the importance, or to indicate the shape, size, movement, etc. These are non-verbal cues provided in the oral message given by the teacher for enhancing the value of the message. So, the body language and facial expression of the teacher should be pleasant, relevant to explain the concepts and make teaching learning a live experience. For example, while teaching the shape of the earth, the teacher can use hand gestures to indicate its spherical shape. Next, the gestures to be avoided. They are leg or foot tapping, clearing throat, arms crossed, legs crossed, face turned away, yawning, etc. It must be remembered that the gestures should be used wisely, as the overuse of gestures might end up becoming a habit and then defeat the purpose of being a stimulus. Next component is change in speech pattern. The attention capturing behavior of the teacher is related to the art of bringing appropriate variation or change in tone, pitch or speed of a voice. The teacher should vary his speech pattern depending on the relevance of the content and to break the monotony of the class. It also helps in reflecting on the importance of the concept being expressed. The following are the speech patterns that may be used for this purpose. Speed of the voice, that is low pitch, high pitch. For example, while reading a lesson, a teacher has to read certain sentences emphasizing anger, so she can raise the volume of her voice and suddenly slow down. These changes in speech patterns make the lesson more interesting. It may be noted that the teacher should be able to change his speech pattern at proper points and in appropriate situations. If a teacher teaches in a monotonous tone without using inflection, gradually the pupil's attention is distracted and at times they may indulge in dozing off or daydreaming in the class. The next component is focusing. Focusing refers to the behavior that helps in focusing the pupil's attention on a particular word, idea, rule or generalization. Such behavior may take the following forms: use of verbal statement, use of gesture and use of both verbal statement and gesture. Focusing implies drawing the attention of the learners towards a particular point that the teacher wishes to emphasize. To exercise the component of focusing by the teacher, the following methodology is followed. Verbal focusing. Statements like listen carefully, look at the blackboard, look at this diagram, watch the experiment now, here is something really important, etc. illustrate verbal focusing. Gestures include smiling, nodding, shaking and tilting the head, looking thoughtfully at the pupil, frowning and pointing towards some objects with fingers. These gestures should have a specific purpose so that pupils are able to decode what this gesture means. Verbal and gestural focusing. When both verbal and gestural focusing devices are used, it has more impact on students. For example, when the teacher asks the students look at the diagram and at the same time draws the diagram on the blackboard, thus she will be able to help the students to properly understand the concept. There is a change in the sensory channel from listening, that is verbal speech, to looking, that is visual display. From writing it down to demonstrating will help in maintaining the level of attention and motivation of the students. The next components are pausing and oral visual switching. Pausing refers to behavior related to introducing silence during speaking. A pause of 3 seconds is regarded as quite effective in securing and sustaining pupils' attention. Oral visual switching. This behavior refers to the introduction of a change or variation in the use of the medium. For example, oral to visual, visual to oral or a combination of oral and visual. Pausing. Pausing is silence for some second. Silence indicates a pause during talk. In the classroom, if a teacher is continuously talking and asking questions without giving time for pupils to respond, pupil loses their attention in the lesson. So, pausing is a silence that stimulates thinking. The teacher keeps silence intentionally, which conveys meaningful message without uttering a word. Thus, silence can be used to secure pupil attention. If the teacher suddenly becomes silent during teaching, it immediately draws the pupil's attention towards the teacher and hence towards the lesson. Next, the purpose of the pausing. They are as follows: to secure the attention of the pupils, to give time for structuring an answer to the teacher's question, to give time for the assimilation of ideas and concepts. There are certain precautions that need to be undertaken while pausing, which are as follows. Pauses should not be too long or too short. Pauses should be at an appropriate place in the utterance. Pauses can be given at an inappropriate place provided the aim is to capture the attention of the non-attending pupils. The next component is oral and visual switching. Oral visual switching refers to the changes or variations in the sensory focus for imparting information to the pupils. The sensory channels of the students need to be shifted as per the demand of the content. For example, from listening to looking, from reading to writing, from speaking to doing, from speaking to blackboard writing, and from blackboard writing to demonstration, etc. are various changes of sensory forms. It is done in the following ways. Oral to visual. When the focus of attention is changed from verbal stimulus to visual stimulus, it is known as oral visual switching. For example, while speaking, the teacher shows a model or chart. The switching of sensory focus is from oral to visual. Visual to oral. When the teacher demonstrates the experiment silently and then explains the phenomena with the help of a chart, maps, diagrams, etc., it is said to be visual to oral switching. This involves shifting of focus from visual stimulus to audio-visual stimulus and vice versa, both oral and visual. To make teaching learning effective and also to break the monotony of the class, one can change the focus of attention by using both oral and visual switching. For example, while explaining a point, the teacher shows a chart or a model along with an explanation by the teacher. It is known as both oral and visual. The last component is change in interaction style. The interactive art of teaching is constantly the communication between the teacher and pupils. The main pattern of interaction between teacher and pupils are teacher to the whole class, teacher-group interaction, teacher-pupil interaction, and pupil-pupil interaction. The classroom interaction pattern must be changed according to the demand of the content. It helps the teacher to make the class lively and encourages the student to be more participative. This can be of 4 types. Teacher-class interaction. In this, the teacher conveys and gets responses from a class as a whole. Next, teacher-group interaction. In this, the teacher conveys and gets responses from a class or a group as a whole. Teacher-pupil interaction. This type of interaction takes place when the teacher directs a statement or a question to an individual pupil. The teacher may ask an individual pupil a question, receive an answer, and follow it up with a series of questions to the same pupil when he wants to probe into the issue more deeply. Pupil-pupil interaction. When the teacher asks a question and discussion for answers takes place among the pupils, then pupil-pupil interaction goes on in the class. The teacher may involve many students in a dialogue by asking a question and without commenting, redirecting the question to another pupil. However, if one style of interaction continues for a longer time in the class, a certain amount of boredom is bound to occur. Hence, to secure and sustain the pupil's attention, the teacher should change the interaction style deliberately. This was all about the components of stimulus variation skill. Now, you can see the format of preparing the micro lesson plan for stimulus variation skill. This is the rating scale format consisting of different components of this skill of stimulus variation. Now let us understand the table. The table comprises 3 columns. The first column indicates the serial number of this skill component. The second column specifies the components of this scale. The third column contains the rating on a scale ranging from 0 to 6 against each of the components. Judgments have to be given on this 7-point scale for the components of this skill. Indicate the extent of acquisition of various aspects of this skill by putting a tick in the box. The points on the scale indicate the following: 0 for extremely weak, 1 for very weak, 2 for weak, 3 for average, 4 for good, 5 for very good, and 6 for excellent. In reteaching, the same format is used. Now I hope you all have understood the importance, meaning and components of the skill of stimulus variation. This video will help you in preparing the micro lesson plans for practice teaching as well as in gaining competence in the use of this skill. Thank you.